You're listening to the Nick Black Halloween special. Hi, I'm Nick Black, and Halloween is my favorite time of the year, and it always has been for as far back as I can remember. I mean, I know most of us like Halloween. You know, as kids, we like dressing up in costumes, going trick-or-treating. It was a little bit different for me in a very good way. Essentially, Halloween for me was like Halloween on steroids. I was rather spoiled. Let me explain. For a couple reasons, Halloween was just bigger to me. One, my uncle, my mom's brother, he was a mask maker. Specifically, like, mostly horror oriented. I mean, worked on commission, so it wasn't always horror. Like, there was one time he made a Tick mask from the cartoon The Tick, and Pinky and the Brain, stuff like that. But most of his work, he was a horror nerd. Most of his work was horror oriented, and I mean, he's a really big reason why I grew up a horror nerd, because I was just exposed to this stuff as a child. So on Halloween, he would make really cool shit. Like, he would make decorations, so the house was like my grandfather's house was always just so much cooler, because it wasn't store-bought decorations. It was handmade, very good-looking decorations, like, tombstones, stuff like that. But also, my grandfather's neighborhood was like literally the best when it came to the two big holidays, Halloween and Christmas. It was a long neighborhood. Like, the street was very long, like probably goes on for about a mile. In the heart of a very big residential area. And so were the neighboring streets, the next street over, just these really long strips of just houses, right? And growing up in the 80s and 80s and 90s, those neighborhoods were essentially like the Halloween version of Candy Cane Lane. Someone once dubbed it to me Candy Corn Lane, and I thought that was kind of cute, but I hate candy corn because candy corn sucks. But for those who don't know what I'm talking about, every year around Christmas time, various parts of the country have these neighborhoods that are designated Candy Cane Lane, where the houses are decorated very extravagantly. Whole neighborhood might actually have like a theme going on that might be organized. It might be very detailed, and people will go and drive through and view everything. That's what Halloween was like for me. Like, literally every house had big extravagant decorations, and we're talking about dozens and dozens and dozens of houses. Like, trick-or-treating for me would go on for like more than an hour, sometimes closer to 2 hours, right? We'd start at like 6 and we'd end closer to like 8 or 9. Usually like 8:30ish is when we'd stop. One year, me and my cousin actually took out pillowcases. We were like, we're gonna fill up these pillowcases. Well, we might have gotten about halfway through before our feet started getting tired and places kind of stopped giving out candy. But I mean, we must have gone up and down like 5 or 6 blocks, right? I mean, things were definitely different back then, for sure. Like, they're not like how they are now with the pandemic, but even like pre-pandemic, it just kind of seems like not as many people are into Halloween as it used to be. Before we ended up losing the house, after my grandfather passed away, we lost the house. The very last year that I did Halloween in that neighborhood was 2015. We were the only house on this gigantic strip of just residential area that was passing out candy. There was plenty of trick-or-treaters, but we were the only one giving out candy, and that was pretty depressing. But let me go back to the beginning and further illustrate why this was such a big deal to me. So, I was born in 84, and I can remember things as back as like late 86, but 87 on up is really where the chunk of my memories date back to. And at the time, I was an only child, but I had 3 older cousins that we were all really close. We were raised like siblings. And again, having an uncle who was a major horror nerd, growing up a horror nerd myself, everyone in my family was just really, really into Halloween. We would, do it, but we made our own costumes. Like I've only ever bought a costume one time in my life, and that was in 2008. I wanted to be Joker because that was the year The Dark Knight came out, and everyone was like, "Oh man, Heath Ledger's Joker." But that was the only time in my life I ever bought a costume. Every other costume I've ever had, literally as far back as I can remember, was handmade. When I was a kid, they were made by my aunt. As I got older, I started making it myself. Actually, you know what? I it's not really a lie if you just were wrong. I correct myself. This year I bought a costume. I'm wearing a costume this year. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to be sitting around the house, watching horror movies and whatnot. But it just didn't feel right not dressing up for Halloween. So I found really cheap on Amazon, like $25, a vampire costume. And that's what I'm going to be. It's low effort Halloween, but under the circumstances, best I can come up with. But anyway, I remember everything I've ever dressed up as. In 87, I was a Ghostbuster. In 88, I was Zorro. In 89, I was Batman. In 90, I was Dracula. 91, I was Spider-Man. In 92, I was Conan. In 93, I was... Oh, man, this is a close one. 93 was a weird year. I decided to design my own costume. And I came up with this radical design that looked like a cross between like the Crypt Keeper and a Power Ranger. And I was a weird kid. I don't really know what I was thinking. I literally just started drawing something on paper and my aunt made it. That was an awkward Halloween at school, trying to explain to everyone what I was because I wasn't sure myself. I just literally made something up that looked silly. In 94, I was Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. In 95, I was Jason. In 96, I was just a vampire, like no one specific. Just a vampire. In 97, I was Michael Myers. In 98, I was a zombie soldier. Because in high school, I was in an ROTC program, and I just happened to have a pair of BDUs. So that was an easy costume to make. In 2000, I was a werewolf. 2001, for a variety of reasons, the year 2001 is a year that I don't remember all that well, if I'm being honest with you. In 2002, I don't think I dressed up as anything in 2002. I remember just wandering around town, and I'll get back to that in a minute because that's actually a story. 2003, I was Angel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In 2003, I was a werewolf. In 2004, I was Angel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In 2005, I was Wolverine. In 2006, I was Superboy. But at that time in the comic book, Superboy was dead, so I was Zombie Superboy. And I was actually really proud of that costume because that was a really good-looking costume. In 2007, I was Freddy Krueger, but I didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't find an affordable green and red Freddy Krueger sweatshirt. But I found a really cheap black and white sweatshirt that looked just like Freddy Krueger's sweatshirt, but it was black and white, and it was kind of like that one scene in Nightmare on Elm Street 5 where he's killing the comic book nerd, and part of that scene's in black and white. So I just told everyone I was Freddy Krueger from that one comic book scene in Nightmare on Elm Street, and everyone bought it. 2008, I was Joker. 2008, that was actually an interesting Halloween too. I'll get that in a minute. In 2009, I was another vampire, like not a specific one, just a vampire, but that was like a really cool costume I had come up with because I was going for like a something similar to like the 30 Days a Night, right? So I was like I had the black blazer, white shirt, but I tore this white shirt to shreds and I just completely covered it in a type of fake blood that wasn't meant to be used on clothing. Like, it was a very kind of like thick gel fake blood that I'd gotten at, the local spirit store. And like I said, it wasn't designed. I forget what its specific application was, but it wasn't meant to be used on clothing. And so even though it dried, it was still very shiny and still almost felt wet. Like if you touched it, I mean, it wouldn't come off on you, but it still felt wet. And so it was really cool when I'd done my makeup. And I'm actually pretty good at, doing makeup for Halloween stuff. So much to the point I keep telling myself, if I ever do decide to make like my own movie, I could do all the makeup effects easily. I guess it just runs in the family. In 2010, I was a werewolf again. And that was another really good Halloween for a variety of reasons. That was the year the Raiders put up 59 points on the Broncos in Denver, the Mile High Massacre. And, some other rather personal reasons that made the day very special. I'm not going to get into that. 2011, I was a zombie. That was another interesting year. 2012. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. The last 8 years, I can name off the things that I was, but I don't remember which year was which, because I got to a point in my life where my concept of time just kind of started getting all wacky. And just things I'm like, oh man, that wasn't really 3 years ago, was it? And yes, it was. So throughout those years, I was, I know I was Ash, specifically from the end of Army of Darkness, where he's back at S-Mart. I was S-Mart Ash, and that was actually, a really cool costume. Not a lot of high effort, but I made the robot gauntlet glove out of a Freddy Krueger glove. I cut the blades off and I painted it silver, and I glued it to like a knit little glove. And I was Jason at one point. That one I think was actually 2012, because I remember my friend Tyler helped me out with a video we had made, and he was still here in 2012, but he wasn't here the following year. So maybe it was 2013 I was Ash. I'm having a hard time remembering 2014. Or wait. Yeah, I'm having a hard time remembering 2014. In 2015, I was Frankenstein. And I've got another story. I got plenty of Halloween stories. Like I said, it's my favorite holiday. 2016, I was Leatherface. That's actually one of my favorite costumes I've ever done. I bought a Leatherface mask. And I bought a $2 toy chainsaw. And then I went to the Goodwill, and I got a short sleeve dress shirt, a tie, and a yellow apron for a grand total of $10. And the mask cost me $10. So I spent less than $25, and I put together this really, really awesome Leatherface costume. And then that was 2016. In 2017, it was just 3 years ago. Why can't I remember this? Okay, let's skip 2017. I'm drawing a blank here. But in 2018, I was Hopper from Stranger Things, in his police outfit, first 2 seasons. And then last year, I was Date Hopper from season 3. So I guess I had to buy that shirt. So, okay, I guess I have on occasion bought some things, right? But for the most part, I put my costumes together myself. Man, those 2 years that I can't remember, it was really bugging the hell out of me. What was I? If it comes to me, I'll bring it up. Anyway, back to the early days. Like I said, the neighborhood my grandfather grew up in was huge. And I mean, when I say huge, I mean huge. I remember 1 year I gave out 5,000 pieces of candy, and I wasn't giving out giant handfuls to people. I literally would if the costume was just okay, you get 1 piece of candy. If the costume was good, you got 2 pieces of candy, because we saw a lot of people, and I wanted that candy to last the whole night. And yeah, we would see thousands of people, because again, it was kind of like a Halloween version of Candy Cane Lane. People came in from all over the city. I know it because when I was 13, I determined I was too old to go trick or treating, which I don't actually agree with now. I don't think you can be too old to go trick or treating, and under normal circumstances, non-pandemic circumstances, if you came to my neighborhood and said trick or treat, I don't care if you're in a costume or not. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you have a bag. You can just hold out your hand. If you tell me trick or treat, I'm giving you candy, right? Halloween is the best day of the year. Everyone can participate, and it's all love, right? But when I was 13, I had convinced myself I was too old, but I still really loved everything about trick or treating, so I decided I was going to pass out the candy, right? That way I could still see everyone in the costumes. I was also 13. There was a lot of teenage girls at the time, and, you know, I don't know, I haven't really passed out candy since we lost my grandfather's house, because the neighborhood I currently live in, not that big of a deal around here. We might get, maybe 5 or 6 trick-or-treaters. I don't see a lot of people now, so I don't know what it's like now, but back then, 13-year-old Nick really wanted to see all the other teenage girls in their costumes, so I was very enthusiastically giving out candy that year. And not just teenage girls, also the moms, because we're talking about the 90s, man, and, costumes were what they were. But that's actually where I came up with my stance now on trick-or-treating, where I don't care how old you are, because as I started passing out candy, I would see more and more people, adults without kids, and in a lot of cases not even wearing costumes, literally come, hey man, I know I'm old, but can I have candy? And you got to be a real asshole to say no, right? I mean, you really do. I've heard people say that, if you don't have a costume, no candy. I mean, no, fuck you. This is Halloween. If you come up, you say trick or treat, I'm giving you candy. That's the requirement. That's the prerequisite. You don't have to have a costume. You don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to have kids with you. You don't even have to have a basket of any kind or a bag. Like, literally, I had this dude show up in jeans and a tank top and just held his hand out. Goes, man, I know I don't have a costume. Can I still get some candy? Yeah, you can. Here you go. Happy Halloween, right? It should be fun. But anyway, there used to be a house right across the street from my grandfather's house. And I think this is one of the things that really attracted people to that neighborhood. So from before I was born until right around the time I got to high school, these people live across the street from my grandfather's house. They, my understanding, what I was told about this family, because I didn't know them personally, I just knew them from the neighborhood, specifically just Halloween. My understanding was there was a married couple with kids, and the wife's father was a farmer and grew pumpkins every year. And we're talking giant pumpkins. We're talking like 4 feet tall, maybe 3 feet wide, huge pumpkins, and dozens of them. So much so that they would convince their next door neighbors on each side of them to let them display all these incredibly carved jack-o'-lanterns on 3 lawns, right? And I'm talking about the kind of jack-o'-lanterns you would see on shows like, what's that show on the Food Network where they're carving up all kinds of crap, these cool-looking dioramas out of food and whatnot. We're talking like expertly carved jack-o'-lanterns. Like some cases, typical jack-o'-lantern faces. Some of them would have scenes from movies, right? You'd have it would be like literally they would do a whole scene. Some of them would have words, Happy Halloween, all this other stuff. The local news, KSBW 8, would come by every year and do a little expose on this family and their 3 lawns of pumpkins. So when I say this neighborhood was like packed, this neighborhood was packed. Like you couldn't drive, so we'd get there early, right? So actually, I didn't actually live there. I stayed there a lot of the time. It was my grandfather's house, but I didn't live there on like a day-to-day basis, right? So I'd get out of school and then get, whatever I need to get ready for trick-or-treating. And we get there early because if you got there around trick-or-treating time, you couldn't park anywhere, right? And even just driving through the neighborhood was a madhouse because cars would be coming constantly trying to find places to park. People would be, driving, crossing the streets. It just, you didn't want to be driving there during trick-or-treating time, right? It was a pain in the ass. So we'd get there early, park. My grandfather had this huge lawn, so my cousins would come over. We'd just park on the lawn and everything, when there wasn't, full decorations if we needed to. The whole nine, right? And we'd just wait until the sun would go down and then trick-or-treating time, right? But it was like block parties, man. This is like, it was packed to the brim. But because of all the attention this neighborhood would get, like everyone in the neighborhood would just fully, like, we're talking, it would, like, you'd see neighbors try to outdo other neighbors with their Halloween decorations, kind of like things you would see on, like, Home Improvement, right? Trying to outdo each other with the home decorations. And I'll bring up Home Improvement a little bit later. I even remember when I was like a little kid, right? We're talking like maybe 4, maybe 5. We're talking, this is like 88, 89. There was a house on the next street that had done the interior of their house like a haunted house attraction. And I mean, our parents were with us. We weren't by ourselves. We didn't trick or treat by ourselves as kids, but they would have, trick or treaters come through the house and go do the in-house haunted house attraction. Like shit like that was really cool that you couldn't do now. You wouldn't want to do now because that's weird and inappropriate, isn't it? Right? If you went, trick or treating, knock on the door and someone opens the door and just to say, come on in, some stranger. Or more importantly, would you want to let strangers just wander in your house like that? But this was a different time, and we all thought that was pretty cool, right? Like I said, times have changed, and I don't mean the pandemic. Things are just not what they used to be, but I still go past that neighborhood almost every year now, just to see what it's like, and it's still packed. It's still, jumping. And hell, last year I even saw a bunch of houses that were, fully decorated with, all kinds of talking scarecrows, and like I saw one house that had like its own like zombie like diorama set up on the front lawn. So it seems like the spirit is coming back, which makes me happy. We don't have that house in that neighborhood anymore, but I'm glad that some things haven't completely changed, right? Because if they did, it'd be depressing. In fact, that year I was talking about 2015, that last year where we were the only house giving out candy, I was depressed as fuck. Literally like my favorite day of the year, and no one was participating. And I don't know why that year. Like, it wasn't like there was anything like now, obviously, a lot of places, a lot of houses aren't going to be giving out candy. We're not giving out candy. We're in the middle of a pandemic. But it just seemed like a bad year, I guess. But again, I was spoiled, right? I've done I've done trick-or-treating. Like, I spend most Halloweens now with my girlfriend in her neighborhood. And, kind of like the neighborhood I live in now. Not a lot of trick-or-treaters, right? You might get a trick-or-treater once every 15, 20 minutes maybe. Don't even give out a full bowl full of candy. And it's not what I'm used to. I mean, literally, like, giving out an average of 5,000 pieces of candy a year to not even a whole bowl, right? So like I said, I was spoiled. Things were different for me. But then also at the same time, like I mentioned, I grew up a horror nerd. The horror genre, one of my favorite things in the world is movies, right? Movies and television. And one of my favorite genres, arguably my favorite genre, because I have a hard time deciding my absolute favorites on anything. I got so many passions and so many interests, it's hard to just pick one. But if you point a gun to my head, I'd probably say the horror genre is my favorite genre. I'm a major horror nerd. I always have been. I always will be. And again, growing up in the family I grew up in, kind of fed into that, right? My sister will tell you she's the same way. It's just kind of the luck of the draw, right? And so one of my current traditions, one of my long-standing traditions has always been, starting on September 1st, actually, I start binging horror movies. Now, most years it's like the same thing, right? I have like my go-tos that I watch every single year. The last few years, I've tried to incorporate new stuff. This year, I went really heavy. In fact, I haven't even watched most of my once a year. I have to watch these movies every, Halloween time. I've actually skipped a lot of that this year. I've watched so many things that I've never seen before. In some cases, like classics that you would say, how have you never seen that? In other cases, things even I've never heard of, right? But, this year I was like in the spirit of trying something new. In some cases, it worked out well. In other cases, I regretted watching it. Some of the movies I watched were just like, wow, a total waste of time. That was terrible. But I came up with a list of like my top 10 These are my must-watch movies every single year. I don't think I'm going to have time to go through all 10 of these this year. But my absolute, I have to watch these movies every single Halloween. My go-to, I guess you can say Nick Black's top 10 Halloween movies, right? Now, I don't mean Halloween movies like they're about Halloween. I mean horror movies. I mean movies that you should watch. Movies that you watch to get yourself in the Halloween spirit, right? These are my absolute top 10 must-watch every year. Number 10, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Now, this is one that gets a lot of hate. And I've never understood why, right? So in the original non-remake, or prior pre-remake, pre-reboot Halloween film series, there are, I believe, 8 films. The first one is obviously everyone's favorite. I've never met a single person that did not say that the first Halloween was their absolute favorite in the series. The second one, which takes place immediately after, I don't mean like right after, you could do a supercut of 1 and 2 together as one single story. Some people like it, some people don't. I like it, other people don't, right? And I get it. That's the movie where we find out that Laurie Strode was adopted, and she's actually Michael Myers' sister, and that's why Michael Myers is after her, and so on and so forth. I actually like that. I like that whole story idea. I love that's part of the original canon. Some people don't. The reboot from a couple years ago retcons that. I don't like the reboot at all, and that's one of the reasons I don't like it. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, is the one that has nothing to do with any of the other films in the series. They didn't have any intentions on making a sequel originally, right? You know, the Halloween was, the Michael Myers story was a one-off story. Their original intention was each Halloween film was going to be a completely original story with no connection, just almost like an anthology series of films, if you will. But since the first one was such a big hit, the studio really wanted to do a follow-up to that, so they did that and kind of wrapped up the story. If you see the end of it, Loomis and Michael get burned up in the hospital, and you presume they died, yada, yada, yada. Story closed, right? And so they continued their original plan of an original story, just every October. Here's Halloween 3, Halloween 4, yada, yada, yada. Completely original horror film. Halloween 3, starring what's probably my favorite actor of all time, Tom Atkins. I absolutely love this man. Everything he does, he's fantastic. And even if the movie isn't that good, like I've never been that crazy about The Fog, but it's worth watching just because he's in it. It's a movie. It's a weird movie. Like, it really is. Some like pagan cult has this company that makes Halloween masks for children. And I know I'm getting some of the details wrong because I haven't seen it in a while, but I don't think I'm getting too much wrong here. There's this commercial that plays every day, up until Halloween. There's X more days till Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. X more days till Halloween. Silver Shamrock. Silver Shamrock's the company that makes these masks, and they want as many kids to buy these masks as possible. And each commercial is like, remember to tune in Halloween night at this time for wearing your Silver Shamrock masks, for a special, surprise, whatever. And the plan is that when the kids put on their Silver Shamrock masks and they're sitting in front of their TV screens at, 9 o'clock at night on Halloween, something like that, a signal will get sent from the TV to their masks that will cause their heads to completely explode with bugs and snakes, killing the kids. And that's actually exactly what happens. The good guys are not successful in stopping this. Now, why this company wants to, I don't remember if they have a means of justifying this plan. And it's just even saying it out loud, it just feels weird to say it out loud. Now, what's even weirder is I actually like this movie. A lot of people hate this movie, and I get it. It's got nothing to do with the rest of the series. No Michael Myers. But you'll hear people say it's the worst Halloween movie. And that is just not true, because there are other films in this series far worse than Halloween 3. Again, I get it. When you're watching the Halloween movies, you want to see Michael Myers. I totally get it. Trust me, I do. But Halloween 3 is not nearly as bad as people claim it is. And in fact, I think a lot of people that say it sucks haven't actually seen it. They just think it sucks because no Michael Myers. It's not a great film by any means. But if you haven't seen it, I would recommend giving it a try. Just for the hell of it, right? Since there was no Michael Myers in Halloween 3, which came out in 82 or 83. I don't remember specifically the year, but it was early 80s. And it was not a hit because people were expecting Michael Myers. God, how many times have I said the name Michael Myers in the last 5 minutes? So Halloween 4, the return of Michael Myers. You find out that Laurie Strode had a daughter, Jamie, played by Danielle Harris, who was given up for adoption. She is Michael Myers' niece because at this point in the timeline, Laurie Strode is still Michael Myers' sister, and therefore her daughter would be Michael Myers' niece. Michael Myers survived the events of Halloween 2, and so did Dr. Loomis, although his face is rather scarred. Michael Myers breaks out of the institution that he has been incarcerated in, heads back to Haddonfield, Illinois, to now come after his niece. Why? Because that's what Michael Myers does. I really love Halloween 4. In all of the films in the series, it is my second favorite behind the original. And I don't care about any of the criticisms people have of it. I love that movie. And maybe a big part of it is because for literally as far back as I can remember, it was on TV every year. And I've just seen it a bajillion times. Now, Halloween 5, which was a direct follow-up to Halloween 4, takes place right after. Yada, yada, yada. That's not nearly as good as 4. And a lot of people hate that movie too. I don't hate it. I actually like it. All things considered, I enjoy it. That weird thing where there's this cult, this supernatural cult that worships Michael Myers. Is that the right way of putting it? I don't know. It's never really explained until the 6th movie. And the 6th movie, The Curse of Michael Myers, I think is the absolute worst in the whole series. It is. We're talking about just as a movie, it is awful. It's the worst film under the Halloween series, period. But it gave us Paul Rudd. So you got to take the good with the bad, right? I want to say the 7th one is Halloween H2O, where they retconned everything. Laurie Strode didn't have a daughter named Jamie that she gave up for adoption, but she ended up having a son played by Josh Hartnett. I've only seen it the one time. I really don't like it. But it was their first attempt at going, you know what? Let's bring back Jamie Lee Curtis, but let's change everything, right? Let's change the story. Yeah, I don't like that movie. I don't like the 8th one, Halloween Resurrection. Busta Rhymes drop kicks Michael Myers. That's just a weird thing. And it's cheesy as hell when you see it. I don't like that movie either. They're not as bad as Halloween 6. I would rather watch Halloween 3 than 6, 7, or 8. I really don't like the Rob Zombie remake. It literally takes everything that made Michael Myers great and throws it out the window. I couldn't even watch the sequel to that. I started the first 30 minutes or one really long dream sequence, and I thought that was pretty lame, and I just kind of stopped. I don't like Halloween Kills. I thought it was, not Halloween Kills, that's the upcoming one. I don't like the sequel that's just given the exact same name. It's just called Halloween, and it completely erases Halloween 2 on up. It wants you to just think this is a direct continuation from the first movie. Nothing happened in between, but it has the exact same title as the original. I hate when they do that. Kind of like the Thing remake from a few years back that was just called, not the remake, sorry, it was a prequel to John Carpenter's The Thing, but it was also called The Thing. So people thought it was a remake, and it's not. I thought that was lame. Um, but anyway, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, is my number 10 must-watch Halloween movie. At number 9, I've got the 1990 Night of the Living Dead remake directed by Tom Savini, starring Tony Todd as Ben. Most people prefer the original. The original 1968 George Romero classic, Night of the Living Dead, that radically changed zombies as we know them now. Prior to that film, zombies were the voodoo zombies. They were the dead, but they were reanimated not as carnivorous ghouls, but as slaves, essentially. This was the first one I saw. I saw it when I was about 11 years old on Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs on TNT. And it's what made me fall in love with the idea of the zombie film. And it's my absolute favorite. I mean, for a couple reasons. I actually think it's better than the original, which upsets people when I say that because the original's a classic. How can you dare say it? Yes, the original is a classic. I love the original. I have the Criterion Blu-ray for crying out loud, right? The original is fantastic, but I love the remake more. Primarily, the character of Barbara. I think she is so much better in the Tom Savini remake than she is in the original one. Primarily because she becomes like an alpha by the end. Instead of just continues to be meek and then eventually just gets taken by the invading horde of zombies at the end. Number 8, the classic Boris Karloff Frankenstein film from 1931. I mean, it is a classic. I don't really know what I can say about it that better people haven't said. But my God, even I've got the Universal Classic Collection on Blu-ray, which if you don't own it and you have the means to purchase it, I highly recommend it because it's every single film in that collection is absolutely gorgeous on Blu-ray. I mean, even more so with Creature from the Black Lagoon, because I swear, if I didn't know that movie was shot in 1955, I never would have thought it was an older film, because on Blu-ray, it just looks so beautifully, almost modern on Blu-ray in a way. But, I mean, the classic story, Frankenstein and he creates the monster. The monster is misunderstood, feared. Essentially, he's a child. And he doesn't deserve to be feared. It's a new life. But the people fear him anyway because he is a monster. Well, if you haven't seen the original Frankenstein, I'm not going to give away the ending. You should totally watch it. But Boris Karloff's, the very first one, I know a lot of people love Bride of Frankenstein, and I do too. A lot of people prefer it to the original, but I don't know if you're kind of getting the drift here, but I'm not a lot of people, right? Just the way the movie was shot alone. I could watch this movie without any dialogue. If they converted this into a silent film, I would sit there and just watch the whole thing and still be in awe. I was fortunate enough a few years ago to be able to catch the Fathom event double feature of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein on the big screen. And every single movie you'll ever see in your life is always going to be better on the big screen. Even a movie like this that I'd seen a million times over the course of my life, seen on the big screen for the first time was just a whole different experience and absolutely magnificent. I love this movie. Frankenstein is Frankenstein is actually my favorite. The Creature is my second favorite of the Universal monsters. I'll get to my favorite later on. Number 7, Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, released in 1992, starring Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves. So the novel Dracula is one of my favorite books of all time. I try to read it every few years. I've got 3 different copies of the book myself. And I've always loved vampire movies, right? This is my favorite adaptation of the book. It's arguably the closest adaptation to the book. I mean, there's a couple others that, have probably more detail, more of the important details from the book in the movie, but this one is my favorite. Came out when I was 8, and it absolutely scared the living hell out of me as a child. It took me a while before I could truly actually appreciate it, because it took me a while before I was probably closer to my teenage years before I was actually able to sit down and watch it from beginning to end in one sitting. And, you know, I'll be honest with you. If it wasn't for Keanu Reeves' terrible English accent, this might be a perfect movie. I mean, that's literally the only negative comment I have about it. Now, I love Keanu Reeves, like a lot of people do. And not just because of John Wick. I mean, going back, Point Break is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's definitely my favorite movie ending of all time. I'm a huge Keanu Reeves fan. He just isn't that good in this movie because he can't do a convincing British accent, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. Winona's British accent is pretty solid. It's just hers, but probably the best thing in the movie is Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing. A lot of his lines are ad-libbed, and I think he kind of steals the show, other than obviously Gary Oldman as Dracula. Number 6, The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys is the movie that made me completely afraid to be at the Santa Cruz boardwalk at nighttime. So I was 3 when the movie came out. I live about 40 minutes south of Santa Cruz. Spent a lot of time at the boardwalk as a child. And I saw this movie as a child. My older cousins made me watch it. And naturally, the movie scared the shit out of me, right? Shortly after watching the movie, which was, I saw it on VHS, so we're talking about, this is probably closer to like 88, right? I'm like 3 going on 4. We're at the boardwalk one day, and we would like spend the whole day there. Like literally, we would go there, check out the rides, hang out on the beach, eat lunch, dinner there, pretty much mini golf, all the things that you could do there, because there's a lot of things. If you haven't been to the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, there's just so you can spend the entire day, and I have plenty of times. But 1988, after having seen The Lost Boys, I'm like 3 going on 4 years old, my older cousins point out to this cave, out in the ocean. You can still see the rock formations and whatnot. And they told me that was the cave. That's where David and the other vampires live. And if we're still here at nighttime, they're going to come, they're going to find me, and they're going to kill me. So I spent the rest of the day trying to convince my parents, we need to go. We cannot be here right now. We need to go before the sun goes down. And they're telling me basically, shut up. But again, at that age, you don't know what's real and what's not. And I was gullible as hell. So I spent the rest of the day completely terrified. Naturally, vampires don't exist. And my cousins were just fucking with me. But I didn't know that back then, right? Kiefer Sutherland, man. Like, who doesn't love Kiefer Sutherland? He plays David. I'll say the second in command vampire. I'm not going to say who the lead vampire is, because if you haven't seen this movie yet, that is a twist you're not going to see coming, and you're really going to want to not have that spoiled for you. It's the movie that brought us the 2 Coreys. Corey Haim, the late Corey Haim, and Corey Feldman. Also starred Jason Patric at a time where he really should have been a leading man in Hollywood at some point in his career. There was a few times where it looked like it was almost going to happen, but it just never really did. But I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is my absolute favorite vampire movie of all time. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I'm not sure if you can stream it anywhere right now. I've got it on Blu-ray. I had it on DVD before that, and I had it on VHS before that, so I wouldn't know where to stream it. But if you can find it, highly recommend watching it. At number 5, and most of you are probably going to think this is too low on the list. I understand that, and I just want to get that disclaimer out there right now, because I don't want to hear any bitching about this, right? This is my list, not your list. Number 5, the original 1978 film Halloween by John Carpenter. This is a lot of people's number 1. I mean, a lot of people. And it's an easy one to pick at number 1. I mean, it's called Halloween, for crying out loud. It takes place on Halloween, and it's shown every Halloween. I mean, I'm pretty sure as I'm speaking right now, it's on AMC this very moment. And by the time this uploads, it'll probably be on AMC again. And by the time you listen to it, if any of you out here are actually listening to this, it'll probably be on again. And it'll be on next year, and the year after? Well, we don't know that, actually. Kind of like It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown was always on either ABC, CBS, one of the networks, every single year as far as I can remember. But not this year, because Apple bought the rights and decided, oh, if you want to watch this Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special, Charlie Brown Christmas, blah, 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 you have to subscribe to Apple Plus. So even though Halloween has been on TV every year for as far back as I can remember, who knows, maybe next year, I don't know, HBO buys the rights to it and decides you can only stream this on HBO Max. I don't think that'll happen because HBO is a lot cooler than that. But I didn't think we would see a year where no Charlie Brown holiday specials would be on broadcast television. So can I just say fuck Apple? Whoever made the decision, fuck you right in your ass, you fucking douchebag. Again, I love this movie. I really do. It's one of my favorites. But the next 4 films are just even more so, right? So just accept it. It's my 5th favorite Halloween movie. It's my favorite in the series. But it only falls to number 5 on my list. Let's move on. Number 4, Friday the 13th, Part 3. Also known as Friday the 13th 3D, as it was released in 3D. Everyone has their favorite Friday the 13th movie, right? Obviously, the best one as far as like quality of film is the first one. The second one was the first one that showed Jason featured Jason as the killer. If you haven't seen the original Friday the 13th, I'm not going to tell you who the killer is, but it's not Jason Voorhees. The third one is where Jason puts on the hockey mask for the first time. And that's what most people think of. Oh, that's literally what everyone thinks of when they think of the series. They think of Jason in the hockey mask. Now, I'm very passionate about this whole series. There's a couple films in the series that suck. Obviously, they're not all. You can't hit a home run every single time you come up to bat. But I love the series enough that I own the complete, in like a tin case, Blu-ray set of all of them from the original to the terrible Jason vs. Freddy. And I think it even includes the terrible 2009 remake. But if I'm going to be honest with you, I really love the first 7 of these films. Like, I can watch 1 through 7 at any given time on the drop of a dime without question. 8 sucks. That's the Jason Takes Manhattan. It's barely in Manhattan. Most of it's on a boat. The 9th one is Jason Goes to Hell, and that movie's just weird. That's where Jason, his spirit just possesses different people. There's that scene where the coroner eats Jason's heart, and that's how he gets possessed with Jason. It's weird. His sister's involved. There's some kind of knife. You got to stab the person possessed by Jason with the knife and blah, 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 to kill him. I don't know. It's really weird, stupid. But the very end, it features Freddy's glove coming about the ground to pull Jason's mask down to hell, and that's eventually what led to the film, the crossover film, Jason versus Freddy, or Freddy versus Jason, whatever it's called. That movie sucks. Don't watch it. But Jason Takes Manhattan sucks. I don't like it. Jason Goes to Hell sucks. I don't like it. Freddy versus Jason sucks. I don't like it. And the 2009 remake, I don't like at all because it's just boring. But the first 7, I absolutely love. But 3 is my favorite. Now, why is it my favorite? I'm not sure if I can come up with a definitive answer. Maybe it's because it's the first one where he puts on the hockey mask, and that's what made Jason the Jason that we all know and love. Maybe it's because it's the first one I ever saw as a kid. I remember renting it from my local comm source. That was the name of the video store we would rent stuff from. And just, for those of you who remember what it was like to go to the video store at any given day of the week, you made a lot of your decisions based on how cool the box art was. Don't lie to me. I know you did. You know you did. I did too. And maybe it was the box art and that just really made, I don't know, but this is my go-to. Every time I want to watch one of the movies in the series at random, I always start with this one. The Blu-ray I have even has an optional 3D version if you choose to do so. And as far as 3D movies go, it's not that bad. It's not what we're used to today. It's still the cyan on one lens and red on the other. So it's not like the modern full color 3D that you see nowadays. But see, I don't like that. I like the old school 3D. I like the red and the blue lenses. That's the kind of guy that I am. At number 3, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. This one, much like the third film in the Friday the 13th series, is my favorite of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Now, there's only one Nightmare on Elm Street movie that I do not like at all, and that's the fifth one. Fifth one, just pretty lame. I don't like any of the characters in it. The movie just kind of falls flat in all regards. But every other film in the series, I love to some degree or another. But my absolute favorite is the third one. That's the one with the remainder of the Elm Street kids all find themselves in I don't want to call it an insane asylum. It's not like the criminally insane, but these are all kids that have mental issues. They're all in group therapy, and they all have trouble sleeping because they all dream about Freddy Krueger, because they are the remainder of the Elm Street. Nancy comes back. She knows what's going on, but none of the other doctors do. So naturally, there's a reluctance. John Saxon comes back as her father. It's got my favorite Freddy kills. The characters in it are my favorite in any of the series. And it was written by Frank goddamn Darabont. We're talking about Shawshank Redemption, Frank Darabont. We're talking about Green Mile. We're talking about The Mist. We're talking about season 1 of The Walking Dead's Frank Darabont, starring Patricia Arquette. And I could be wrong, but I want to say it introduced her. I'm pretty confident the opening credits say introducing Patricia Arquette. It's my absolute favorite. I highly recommend it. I mean, obviously, I recommend all the movies on this list, right? At number 2, The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr., 1941. Werewolves are my favorite of all the movie monsters. I think werewolves are cooler than vampires, zombies, ghosts, aliens, anything you can think of. Werewolves are the coolest. The problem is, most werewolf movies suck. I mean, there are some that are good. Obviously, the original Wolfman, Werewolf in London, which came out about 6 years before that. Curse of the Werewolf with Oliver Reed. The first Howling movie. And if you're okay with bad movies, I'll make an argument for Howling 6, because that's a werewolf versus a vampire movie. It's not a good movie, but it's kind of a cool movie. I love Werewolves on Wheels. Biker werewolves, but and then how can I forget American Werewolf in London? The only werewolf movie I like where the werewolf is a quadrupedal. I don't like the on all fours werewolves, like the Twilight, Jacob Black werewolves. I think those are pretty lame. American Werewolf in London is an exception to that rule for me, because that movie is just absolutely incredible. But The Wolfman is my favorite. I mean, literally, it is a classic film in every single sense of the word. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at. Like a lot of the Universal horror movies, there's just something about that period of time with horror movies where they were kind of inspired by German Expressionism, but not nearly as exaggerated and cartoonish, where they really used heavy atmosphere, a lot of smoke, a lot of fog, a lot of shadow, a lot of silhouettes to just compose these gorgeous looking images that 80 to 90 years later are still absolutely stunning to look at. But really, the reason why this is my favorite of the Universal monster movies, and literally actually one of my favorite movies, period, in any genre, at any time period, is Lon Chaney Jr. He is just perfect in this role as the tragic Larry Talbot, who gets bit by a werewolf trying to save a woman from a wolf attack, and is now cursed with transforming into a werewolf at the full moon and killing people at random uncontrollably. He wants to die, doesn't know how to die, can't live with himself because of this curse that has been brought upon him. And throughout the remainder of the film series, Frankenstein meets Wolfman, Abbott and Costello meet yada, 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 House of Dracula, yada, yada, yada. He would continue to be brought back from the dead against his chagrin. Much to his chagrin. and continue to be a tragic, tortured soul. I mean, if you're into horror and you don't like the Universal horror movies, I don't know what to tell you. If you haven't seen this, I highly recommend it. I mean, watch all of them. Dracula is great. Actually, the Spanish version of Dracula is even better than the Bela Lugosi one. I mean, that'll upset a lot of people because the reason that most people like that movie is because Bela Lugosi. I'm just saying, I love him too, but the Spanish language version is a better movie. Creature from the Black Lagoon. Obviously, I mentioned Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, The Mummy, and actually, I really dig the Mummy sequels with Lon Chaney Jr. They're not real sequels because it's a different mummy, different story altogether, but I just think they're really goddamn cool. So that was my number 2 movie, The Wolfman. Now, before I get into my number 1 film, I want to mention 2 films as an honorable mention that I really wanted to put into this list, but compared to the rest of the films on here, I just couldn't squeeze them in my top 10. One is Hellraiser. Written and directed by Clive Barker, based on his short story, The Hellbound Heart. It is a story of a woman who had an affair with her husband's brother and just couldn't get over, I'm going to be blunt, how good of a fuck he was, right? Apparently he had some pretty good dick. He was taken to another realm by a group of, in their own words, angels to some, demons to others, the Cenobites, who take pleasure in torturing those who seek higher forms of pleasure. Dead serious. That's how they explain it in the movie. The only way he can come back is by spilled blood, where he was originally taken by the Cenobites. In the spot he was taken by the Cenobites, you spill blood, it reanimated him. He became this skinless but living portion of his former self, and the more blood he obtained, the closer he can come to achieving his original flesh. So Julia, while her husband is away, brings men into the house, kills them, feeds the blood to her brother-in-law, her lover. It's fucked up, I know. But it's the movie that brought us the character of Pinhead. Everyone knows Pinhead. You might not know the movie Hellraiser, but we all know Pinhead. Played by Doug Bradley in all but 2 of the Hellraiser movies. Hellraiser 1 and Hellraiser 2 are 2 of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I've watched them over and over again for as far back as I can remember. This year, it occurred to me, I'd only ever seen like the first 4, right? And I don't like 3 and 4. And I never saw the rest of the films in this series. So I thought this was the year I finally did that. And I'm not going to lie to you, I totally regret that decision because those movies are terrible. I mean, all of them. From like 5 on up. Well, even 3 and 4 suck. But 10 films in the series, only ones worth watching are the first 2. But damn, they are so worth watching. I highly recommend them. My other honorable mention, Night of the Creeps. Earlier I talked about Tom Atkins is one of my favorite actors of all time. His dialogue in this movie is he has like the best lines in like cinema history in this movie. Night of the Creeps is a 1986 film by Fred Dekker. His movie just before he did Monster Squad. Starring Tom Atkins, Bubba from Mama's Family, and a bunch of actors whose names are escaping me. Jason Lively, I believe, is the main character. But alien slugs have infested a college campus. And they get in through your mouth and turn you into a zombie, basically. Jason Lively's character, the main character, is just trying to join a fraternity to win this girl over when all this happens. He teams up with a detective played by Tom Atkins to rid the campus of this alien infestation. And I'm not going to lie to you. If what I described sounds kind of similar to Slither, it's because Slither is a complete and utter ripoff of Night of the Creeps. I don't care if you like James Gunn. I don't care if you like Slither. It's the same goddamn movie, but it came out 20 years earlier. And Night of the Creeps is better. So if you like Slither and you want to see where James Gunn stole that idea from, check out Night of the Creeps. And even if you don't like Slither, again, if it's got Tom Atkins in it, you gotta watch it. You just absolutely have to. Moving on to my number one, my must-watch every single year Halloween film. Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. This is my favorite movie of all time. Like, if I really had to pick, right, you put a gun to my head, I usually tell people the 3 movies I concede are my favorites. If you made me say one of these 3, it's going to be Godfather, The Wolfman, and Evil Dead 2. But there's just something about Evil Dead 2 that just is a little bit further ahead than any other movies. A quasi remake of Evil Dead. They sold the rights to the footage to fund the distribution of the original film, so they couldn't get access to their original film to do a recap. You got to remember, back in the day, I mean, home video just kind of came out in the middle of the 80s, right? Cable TV was starting to become a thing. You just didn't really see, unless it was like a family-friendly movie that would air on broadcast television. You know, for a good portion of the 80s, if you didn't see a movie in theaters, you didn't see that movie. And then when home video came out originally, it was expensive as hell. I mean, VHSs for a long time were like $90. $90 a tape. Can you imagine spending that much on a Blu-ray? No, of course you can't. Hell, I remember in the mid-90s when they dropped the price of VHS to like $20, and then I started buying them instead of bootlegging them like I used to, because who's got $90 to spend on a movie, right? But that's why the video rental place became so popular. But that was like a mid-80s thing. So when they were making Evil Dead 2 in the mid-80s, home video was just kind of still a new thing, right? So they figure, okay, if anyone's going to watch this movie, they're probably not going to be privy to the information that happened in the previous movie. So they had to reshoot a lot of, like the first 30 minutes of Evil Dead 2 are kind of a remake of the original film, but that's okay, because as good as Evil Dead 1 is, you don't need to watch it, but you need to watch Evil Dead 2. That's all you really need. Evil Dead 2 and then its sequel, Army of Darkness. If you haven't seen Evil Dead 2, I'm going to assume you've probably seen Army of Darkness. And I'm going to assume you love Bruce Campbell and the character he plays of Ash Williams. This is my absolute go-to, my total favorite horror movie. My favorite. I have to watch this. I'm going to watch this tomorrow night for sure. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Unless you just don't have a sense of humor, because it is a horror comedy. And there's a lot of like Three Stooges shit in this movie. And I bring that up because in 2013, when the kind of a remake, but also kind of a sequel. I consider it a sequel because it doesn't have any of the original characters from any of the previous movies. So to me, it's really just mostly a sequel. Same cabin, same recording, same Necronomicon, but different characters. But the Evil Dead from 2013, which was really good, actually. It was really fucking good. See, all 4 movies in this series are awesome. It's the best. But I remember I was still at the shop at the time, and there was these guys that would come in and hang out. And okay, I'm just going to be honest. They weren't the sharpest tools in the shed, right? But they had seen the movie. I hadn't seen it yet. And they came in all excited. They saw the new one. It was so awesome. And I just happened to say, hey, how does it compare to the original films? And they had no idea what I was talking about. They said, original films? What do you mean? So I explained to them this was the 4th film in the series. It was pitched as a remake, yada, yada, yada. And they, we're going to go check those out right now. Thanks for telling us. So they come back to me a couple days later and are completely jaded. I mean, like, totally jaded. Like, what the hell, right? And they actually came to me, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? I was like, what do you mean what's wrong with me? You said those movies are good. I'm like, I fucking love these movies. What are you talking about? Those movies are terrible. I'm like, what do you mean they're terrible? Well, for one, the special effects were bad. These were much younger cats, by the way. And I always hate talking to younger cats. These weren't kids. These guys like in their mid-20s. When they say something like that, oh, the special effects are bad. Yeah, it was a low-budget horror movie in the 80s. Of course the special effects are bad. What were you expecting? Oh, well, they could have been better. Not with the technology and the money they had at that time. Nah, they couldn't. That literally is the best they can make with what they had. But that's like going back and talking shit about the original King Kong, right? Like, anyone who says, oh, but there was no CGI back then, you're a fucking moron, all right? Of course there wasn't. Of course, some special effects don't hold up by today's standards. Does that mean they were bad? Hell no. Like, we're talking literally every generation of filmmaker literally does the best they can with what they have at the time, right? And then he complains to me, well, the second one was almost a comedy. Like, the second one was a total comedy. That's not even like a kind of sort of, a type of interpretation. It's a comedy. They're doing Three Stooges shit in this movie. And it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious, man. I mean, if any of you guys ever seen Ash vs. Evil Dead, I really got to finish that series. But I mean, if you guys seen Army of Darkness, that's a comedy. But they're fantastic, right? Every horror nerd should watch Evil Dead 2. Actually, every horror nerd should watch all of the Evil Dead movies. But you should especially watch it on October 31st. It is just the absolute best. But I don't just watch movies around this time of year. Growing up in the late 80s, throughout the 90s, Halloween specials on TV were just like the best, right? I'm not going to do a ranking in any particular order because there's too many good ones to just rank and file. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of my favorite ones. First and foremost, the first 6 Treehouses of Horror, the Simpsons Halloween Special 1 through 6, are absolute must-watches for me. Now, after that, I really stopped liking the Simpsons Halloween Special, starting with the one where Kang and Kodos are posing as Clinton and Bob Dole running for president. I just think it kind of goes downhill. Now, in the last decade or so, there's been a couple that weren't that bad. I want to say 20 was okay. The one where the last segment is kind of a musical where Homer gets impaled on in Moe's basement and his blood gets put into the beer and everyone loves the way that beer tastes. So they start drinking them and that one was kind of cool. But the first 6 are just the best. We're talking about The Raven, which I got to confess something. I had originally intended to start this whole special off by reading The Raven. It's something I've always wanted. I love The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Something I've pitched every year to the Oh My Geek podcast, but we just never had the time to rehearse it and really do it justice because I was always busy. And I thought this year, since I don't got no job, and this is my show, written by me, not really, this is all unscripted, but produced by me, recorded by me. Like, literally, I'm the only one doing this. I thought there's no one to stop me. I had started to record it. And about 7 minutes into it, I started messing up the words. And I thought, this is terrible. We'll try it again next year. But I had intended to start this special off with a reading of The Raven. And no, I didn't save the recording. So if you wanted to hear me do a bad reading of The Raven, you're shit out of luck. You got to wait till next year. But that great, segment where, James Earl Jones is narrating and Homer is the person that's mourning the lost Lenore. We're talking the one with the monkey's paw that grants all the wishes. We're talking the one where Homer buys Bart the evil Krusty doll that wants to kill him. We're talking about the one with the zombies. Dial Z for Zombies, where they accidentally unleash a zombie apocalypse upon Springfield. We're talking about Warner Burns as Dracula. We're talking about The Shining. We're talking about Attack of the 50-Foot Eyesores, where all the billboards come to life. We're talking about Homer Cube, the 3D CGI, animated. We're talking about the one that was a take on, terror, at 30,000 feet Twilight Zone, where Bart sees the gremlin on the side of the bus. We're talking about the one where groundskeeper Willie is Freddy Krueger. We're talking about those are the ones. I love those ones, man. Those are actually, they're my favorite Simpsons episodes. They are just absolutely brilliant. I watch them every year, and not only do I think they hold up well, I think they're still better written than most Simpsons episodes are today, right? I really stopped liking The Simpsons in the early 2000s. So, like, 90s Simpsons, I absolutely adore, still to this day. This century's Simpsons, I don't really like the show at all. I mean, again, every once in a while there's an episode that's not that bad, but by and large, I think the show's terrible now, which is a shame because I love that show. I mean, I still play Simpsons Tapped Out. Like, the franchise itself is something I'm still very passionate about. I just wish the show was written better nowadays. For live action, Roseanne had the best Halloween episodes. I understand the controversy with the actress in recent years. But I still love the original show. And I just started watching The Conners this week. I didn't see the last season. Is it more than one season? Is this the second season of The Conners or the third season? I'm really behind on a lot of TV watching, but this week they aired The Conners Halloween special. So I watched it because the original Roseanne Halloween specials are some of my favorite childhood memories. They did 8 of them in the original series. 1 through 7 are fantastic. I don't like the 8th one, and from what I've been reading online, nobody else does either. That was that really weird one where it was kind of like Rosemary's Baby, where Darlene had the baby and everything. I just think that's terrible, but the first 7, specifically the first one, is my absolute favorite. That's the one where, kind of like how I talked about when I was a kid, you would have like there was like that house that made the inside of their house like a haunted house attraction. They did that on Roseanne in the very first Halloween episode, which is I forget which episode of season 2 it is, but you can Google it. I believe the episodes are streaming on Peacock. I want to say Peacock. You can watch the original Roseanne series. Don't quote me on that. Google that. Google will tell you. But you can watch them all right now for free. At least I think. Most things are free on Peacock, but some of that stuff is you have to pay for the premium if you want to watch certain movies and shows. I don't pay for the premium because I pay for enough streaming shit. I can't afford to start adding more onto that every month. But that one's great. There's the one where they go to the haunted house in the lodge where DJ wants to dress up like a witch and it creeps out Dan. That's a good one. The one where they pull the prank on Roseanne by making her think that Dan and Fred are having an affair. That's a great one. Like, it's just, so many of these episodes are just absolutely like fantastic. And I'm not gonna lie, I have it all on DVD. They actually made a DVD with all 8 of the episodes on there, and I always watch 1 through 7, and I stop because, like I said, that 8th one's terrible. Home Improvement also had some great Halloween episodes. They didn't have as many as Roseanne did, but they had a couple really good ones. The first one, I believe, is the one where they have a party at the house for Brad's friends, and Brad gets to fight with his girlfriend, who comes to the party with Ryder Strong. You would know him as Sean from Boy Meets World. He plays this total douchebag. Tim makes a haunted house attraction in the basement. Start noticing a theme here, guys. It scares the kid away. Brad gets his girlfriend back. All yada yada yada. There's another one. My memory's telling me that all the Home Improvement Halloween episodes involved a party at their house because, I mean, most of the episodes take place at their house. I mean, sitcoms, right? There was that one where they made Tim think he had a stalker, and the stalker was going to show up at the party and like kill him or something. He was terrified, and it turned out to just be a prank. There was no stalker. Family Matters had some good ones. There was the evil Steve Urkel doll, Stevel, that was a dummy that would like stalk the family and cause all this trouble. There was the one where the power went out, so they all did that thing where you tell a portion of the story and then it goes to the next person who then continues that story, but you're really just making everything up on the fly. And it's like a flashback episode to where it's like Victorian Gothic London, and they're all vampires and whatnot. That was pretty cool. Boy Meets World had 2 Halloween episodes that I absolutely loved. There was the one early in the series that was basically a remake of The Wolfman. Corey thought he was a werewolf, saw the pentagram on his hand, thought he was going to turn into a werewolf and kill Topanga because he loved Topanga. But everything in the episode is essentially a remake of The Wolfman. and it's great. And then the other one I really love was the one where it had Jennifer Love Hewitt in it, and they were trapped in the high school, and there was a killer that was killing them all one by one, in an obvious parody of stuff like Scream, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, so like that one was absolutely fantastic. And other shows did this too. Like, it wasn't just these ABC sitcoms and that Fox cartoon. Lots of shows had a Halloween episode. I remember the Hogan's Family had a good one where Jason Bateman's character was dreaming that everyone was a zombie, and that kind of scared the shit out of me as a kid because those zombie makeup effects were pretty good. Most sitcoms had some type of a Halloween special. Not even just sitcoms. I mean, you're going to find some hour-long dramas that had some. Cartoons did. I mean, there was that Tiny Toons Halloween special that was really good. I think you can still find that I found it on YouTube not too long ago. There's one that I highly recommend. It's not an actual TV special, but if anyone of you subscribe to Shudder, and if you're a horror fan, you really should subscribe to Shudder. Shudder is just like the best. But it's called the WNUF Halloween Special. And it's... mockumentary isn't the right term because it's not a documentary, but it's a mock TV news broadcast from 1987 that is absolutely perfect. So let me explain myself here, or explain my love and affinity for this. So, like I said, I was born in 84, and I really started developing memories around late 86, early 87. So I was actively watching TV back in 1987, and I've been a big TV watcher my entire life. And in recent years, so up until the pandemic hit, those of you who know me know I worked at a comic book store. And one of the things about working at a place like that, right? You want people to come in, you want them to browse, and really you want them to stay there for as long as possible because, I mean, simple basis of it is the more time someone spends there, the more likely they are to spend money, right? So you want to try to create an environment that makes people actually actively want to stay there. You definitely don't want to create an environment where people want to leave, but ideally you want to create an environment where people want to stay. And a big part of that is making sure there's no awkward silence, and ideally that there's some form of entertainment on the screen. Now, I found it challenging to continuously find a type of entertainment to put on the screen that wouldn't upset anybody. So, like, lots of movies were a big no-no because either A, movie had subjective content like violence, language. Obviously, I wouldn't put anything on intentionally with nudity in it. But there was a couple times where I just didn't know, and fortunately, no one got upset. A lot of comic book movies you don't want to put on because not everyone likes all these movies. Like, for example, I like Batman v Superman. I get it. You probably didn't. I've heard all the shit talking. Trust me, I know. But there's no way in hell I was ever going to put that on because a lot of people didn't like that movie. Iron Man 3, another great example. You can't put something like that on because it's just going to upset people. They're going to start talking their shit and people are going to get into arguments. And a lot of just the really entertaining shit is just something that, something's going to offend somebody. It's going to be too violent. There's going to be cussing in it. Or I don't like these kind of shows or movies or blah, blah, blah. So there was constantly a challenge to find things to put on that everyone really seemed to enjoy. I did find some success a handful of years ago. And I would specifically do this around this time of year, Halloween through Christmas time. But I would go on YouTube and find compilation videos of like Halloween commercials from the 80s and 90s. And it was something that people like my age and older would see that and get super nostalgic over. Oh man, I remember this. That was so cool. Younger people would look at it and just fall in love with how great these commercials were, especially compared to commercials nowadays, which are pretty boring. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like when I was a kid, commercials were awesome and they were entertaining. Nowadays, I literally just pull my phone out every time it goes to commercial break. I don't pay attention to commercials now because commercials now suck. But the point I'm getting at is over recent years, I've watched so many hours of Christmas too, but specifically for this topic, Halloween commercials from the 80s and 90s. And I remember what things were like back then. I remember what TV was like back then. The WNUF Halloween special is an absolutely perfect recreation of what watching television was like back in 1987. Every commercial in this, I'll call it movie, is completely original. The director, writer, everything, created everything from scratch. Everything in this feature is 100% original. But we're talking like the fake commercials for TV shows that don't exist. We're talking about commercials for products that don't exist. But everything feels like it was real. And it all feels like it came directly from the 80s. And so the whole point of it is that this was a television station, WNUF. It's their news broadcast and Halloween special that aired on October 31st, 1987, complete with commercials. It starts off, there's someone fast forwarding a little bit. You see like the VHS track, and it literally the whole thing looks like someone recorded this on their VCR, and just an old weathered VHS tape from 33 years ago. The news broadcast is all fake, or it's an original. These are actors playing a part. This was all done, I want to say 2013, and it's perfect. It completely and utterly recreates exactly what TV watching was like back then, especially around this time of year. And I watched it for the first time a couple years ago, and I've totally fallen in love with it. If you have the means to watch it, I highly recommend that. Highly recommend it. But the last thing before I go, the one thing that I really miss, and not just this year, I mean, obviously this year's different, pandemic and all, but one thing I've really missed over the years, when I was a kid, in the 80s and 90s, as I've said many times in this broadcast. Well, this isn't a broadcast. This isn't live. This is all pre-recorded, but I used to love going to haunted house attractions. They used to have several different ones in my city every single year up until basically the turn of the century. And then since then, like the last 20 years, the closest one has been this haunted court maze in Hollister. But the problem with that is it's pretty expensive, and the wait time is super long because it's the only one in this general area. I miss that. Like, I really do, man. Like, I mean, I'm going to assume at some point in your lives, you guys have probably been to a haunted house attraction, right? There's so much fun. And, I mean, not only were they were the more professional ones you would see around town, but at my elementary school, the 4th grade class each year was tasked with putting on a haunted house attraction for the entire school, right? You'd have an entire week to do it. You would create everything from, like, cardboard and poster paper, and like you would make stuff up. The whole class would do it. Everyone would get an assignment and create stuff, and it was always awesome. And so it would be like every half hour a different class would go through the haunted house and do it. And I remember when I was in 4th grade how much fun I had putting that on. What happened to these things, man? Like, I mean, they still exist, but they exist now like out in the sticks, out in the middle of nowhere, out in the woods, in various places. Like, I mean, every year we take every abandoned storefront and turn it into a spirit, but we can't get a haunted house attraction? That's just lame. Last week, on the last drive-in with Joe Bob Riggs, he showed a movie called Haunt, about a group of college kids who go to a haunted house attraction that they really wish they hadn't gone to. A haunted house attraction in the middle of nowhere, ran by the criminally insane and homicidal. That movie's incredible. It was written by, I forget the name of the 2 writers of the film, but they wrote A Quiet Place, which came out 2 years ago, starring John Krasinski and his wife, Emily Blunt. It was a huge hit movie. I'm going to assume you guys saw it. If you didn't, highly recommend it. But this was their first movie. Although I think it came out after. Like I want to say I could have get this information wrong, but I think they wrote it beforehand, and then The Quiet Place's success was what kind of got the script floating around and got it made, because I want to say it came out last year, but it got me thinking about haunted houses again. Obviously, I don't want to go to one ran by these people because, I don't want to die. But they're so much fun, and if I had the means to do so myself, like if I had the money to rent the place out, buy the materials, hire the people to run this stuff, I would totally do one myself. I remember the last time I ever went to anyone, period, it was Santa Cruz Boardwalk. Actually, for a long time, had an attraction that essentially was a haunted house. But the last time I did that was like 2004. I'm not even sure of that. I mean, I've been to the boardwalk since, but nowadays when I go to the boardwalk, it's usually for business, not necessarily for pleasure. So I don't really have a lot of time to just kind of really enjoy the boardwalk nowadays when I go. That's a whole other story. But God, I miss haunted house attractions. But this is me. This is why I love Halloween. What about you? If anyone is listening to this, tell me what your favorite things about Halloween are. Or if you even love the holiday. Some people don't. There are some people who hate Halloween. I mean, sucks to be them, but what are you going to do? But if you love Halloween, tell me why. What are your favorite things what are your traditions? What was your favorite costume growing up? What was your least favorite costume growing up? What's your favorite Halloween memory? What's your least favorite Halloween memory? Feel free to message me or leave something in the comments. If you don't like to leave stuff in the comments on YouTube, you can hit me up on Twitter at Nick, Nick _Black, BLACK. So at NICK _ BLACK. Nick Black like the color, because for some reason no one wants to believe that's actually my name. But let me know. I literally have nothing else to do this year. I'm just going to be home all day. So hit me up on Twitter. And be safe. Don't go out anywhere. Not on Halloween. I'm pretty sure there's going to be plenty of people trick-or-treating anyway. Potentially spreading the virus. Be safe. Wear a mask. Vote on Tuesday if you haven't voted, and preferably vote Biden, because I don't think we can survive 4 more years of this. But stay safe. Have a happy and safe Halloween. Thank you.